Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
So, we're at the finish line of our long story, so get ready for some interesting forks and twists. This is the second part of our video. The first part you will find in the description below this video. Enjoy watching it. I happened to mention that I spent time at Monroe's yesterday to tidy up the plumbing in their bathroom. Have you met the Ice Queen? Ed asked. Edward, I asked you not to call her that, Katie intervened. It's not beautiful, just like she is with us. Ed objected. Yes, I met her, I said. She came to visit her parents while I was working. And what did she say? Ed asked, looking in Katie's direction. It seemed like he knew Taylor had done something in the Ice Queen style and was just waiting to prove that she deserved the title. She told me to clean up and not try to rob her parents. Then she gave them a dressing down for hiring someone who would probably rob them and break something on purpose. Ed had a very smug smile on his face, but Katie gave as good as she got. I never said she was a good person. I just want to say that talking about her like that doesn't make you any better. Guys, what do you know about her? I asked. It's hard for me to believe that such nice people raised such a harpy as their daughter. There must be something more. Katie summarized what they knew. Apparently, she was married and lived in Florida. About 3 years ago, she got divorced and moved back here. Perhaps she has some anger left over from the divorce, or maybe she's just well, we never saw her act any differently, but then we didn't know her before. We all tried to invite her to some neighborhood get-togethers when she first arrived, but she never agreed. Ed contributed, it's a shame. I said she is an amazingly beautiful woman. When I saw her picture on their wall, I thought she was someone I'd like to meet and hoped that you guys were exaggerating the Ice Queen story. But I was quickly convinced. The following weekend, Natalie and her roommate Pat came to visit. Pat was pretty but nothing special, at least in terms of looks. She had shoulder-length wavy brown hair and a slender figure. She had small breasts and slender hips, and the white denim skirt she wore showed off her beautiful legs. We spent the day at the mall, and I bought a few things for both girls. Nat told me that Pat's parents could only pay for her college expenses, so things like new clothes weren't in the budget. I could afford it, so I thought, why not? We had lunch at the food court in the mall and then, at Pat's request, had dinner at Olive Garden. After returning home, we watched a movie on a pay-per-view channel and then went to bed. The guest room had a double bed, so the girls could sleep together if they wanted, but Pat chose to use the pull-out couch in my office. On Sunday, I invited the girls for brunch, and we spent the rest of the day just talking. Natalie, as she often did, took the opportunity to encourage me to start dating, even mentioning that there were several graduate students and even a few professors at the university who were single and would make a good match. I expressed my gratitude for her concern but declined her proposal for matchmaking. The following week, during a poker game, I learned that Natalie and Pat's visit had not gone unnoticed. So, Henry, Bart said, you had a couple of hot young chicks at your house over the weekend. Enjoying your single life, right? Bart, I smiled, I'd appreciate it if you don't call my daughter a chick, at least not to her face. And the other girl was her college roommate. Bart blushed slightly and stammered an apology, but I assured him that nothing bad had happened. 2 weeks later, we gathered for the monthly neighborhood dinner at Monroe's house. Miss Ruth knew how to set the table, and everything was very tasty. It was not surprising that all the neighbors were happy about their participation in the barter exchange. Miss Ruth tried to keep the couples separate when hosting get-togethers, always arranging them on a boy-girl basis and generally mixing them up from month to month. It was her way of breaking down any barriers that might exist and putting everyone on the street on an equal footing. Mr. Monroe sat at the head of the table, and Miss Ruth at the end. I found myself between Ed's wife, Kathy, and Bart's wife, Jennifer. Jennifer was a tall, slender Latina. She was beautiful but wore too much makeup. I think she would have been beautiful anyway, but I never saw her without the excessive makeup she seemed to favor. Still, she was perfect in one important way: she loved Bart with everything she had. In fact, it was obvious that all the couples on this street were completely devoted to each other. This got me thinking about how the former owners of my house ended up here. Part of me was disappointed that Taylor wasn't there. On the one hand, I knew that neither couple cared about her very much, but I also doubted that they had a chance to get to know her better. They only knew her as someone still bitter about her divorce 3 years later. But for me, there was something about her that drew me to her, and I couldn't explain it. I just felt like there was something special in her, if there was a way to get through all the anger and hatred. I tried to avoid my mom's monthly meetings with couples in her area, and the last meeting last week was no exception. She took them all in as surrogate children and really enjoyed cooking for them, but I didn't like spending time there during those parties. Probably there was nothing wrong with the people themselves. It was just hard for me to be around all these happy couples when my personal life was in complete disarray. More often than not, when I looked at a man, especially a married one, I couldn't help but suspect that he was cheating. This was frustrating because I really wanted to meet someone, get married again, and hopefully have a couple of kids. My window of viability in terms of children was closing. I tried to overcome this attitude, but I was so hurt by what Jimmy had done that it was very difficult. I had to admit that I felt some sympathy for Henry. We crossed paths a couple of times, and he seemed nice to me. According to Mom and Dad, he was perfect, but I also knew he was divorced, and I didn't know why, which probably meant he had cheated on his wife. I wasn't about to go down that road again. As they say, once a cheater, always a cheater. Last night, I stayed at my parents' house. We stayed up late watching movies and TV, so I just fell asleep in their guest bedroom. But when I got up this morning to go to work, my damn car wouldn't start. Mom, can I take your car today? My car won't start, and I'll be late for work. Of course, dear. We don't have any plans for today. Thank you. I'll come right after work and sort it out. Henry, the phone rang early in the morning, and I was surprised to hear Miss Ruth on the other end. Henry, I'm terribly sorry to bother you so early, but I wanted to catch you before you left for work. No problem, Miss Ruth. I had the day off today and was already awake. What can I do for you this morning? You know how to repair cars, don't you? Yes, a little, ma'am. More in restoration than repair, but I know something. Are you having problems with your car? Not mine, but Taylor's. Her car won't start. She borrowed mine to get to work, but I thought maybe you could figure it out. Do you have the keys to her car? Yes, we have spare ones. I'll go down and have a look now. Since I was free for the next few days until my next work project was up and running, it was the perfect time for the machine to break down. As I told Miss Ruth, I didn't know everything about auto repair, but it didn't take me long to determine that the problem was with the alternator. I really liked the idea of doing something nice for Taylor. I felt a strong connection with her. Of course, she was beautiful, but there was more to her than that. I felt a surge of energy whenever she was in the same room with me and wondered if she felt it too. I really wanted to ask her out, but she still seemed very withdrawn. I was determined to break through her cold exterior, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to do something new. I spent the next few hours fixing the car, including a trip to the dealership to get an alternator since the auto parts store didn't have one. I managed to fix the car about an hour before Taylor returned. Taylor, Mom, I'm back. Thank you for providing the car. I walked into the house and said hello to Mom and Dad, then started looking for the number of a towing service to take the car to a mechanic. Then I would have rented a car, but my mother stopped me. That's not necessary, darling. Your car has been repaired. Did my car magically get fixed while I was gone? Okay, Mom, I need to get this done before everything closes. No, dear, there was no magic. I asked Henry to take a look, and he took care of everything. Crap. That was very sweet of him, especially when I was so surly with him. I went out to my car, and it started right up. I walked 2 houses down to his place and knocked on the door. When he opened it, he wasn't wearing a shirt, and it looked like he was working out. I had to admit he looked good, muscular, but not overly so. I felt something, okay, more than just something, that I hadn't felt in a while. I realized that I was starting to be drawn to him. Hello, Taylor. How are you today? How's work? His tone surprised me, as if he was really happy to see me and was genuinely interested in how my day was going. This was in stark contrast to how I usually greeted him. Why was he so nice? Everything was fine, Henry, Thanks for asking. Mom said you fixed my car. I wanted to thank you for your help and find out how much I owe you. I was pleased to do this. It was my pleasure to help you, and you don't owe me anything. I would hate not to pay you. What was wrong with it? Just some loose wires. This happens sometimes, but now they are well and securely fastened. You shouldn't have any more problems. Well, thank you. I'm glad it was such a small thing and hope it wasn't too much of a problem. Once again, I am very grateful to you. My pleasure. I was pleased he seemed genuinely and heartily happy that he took care of my problem. It looked like he liked me, although I hadn't given him any reason to. I was smiling and in a good mood as I walked back to Mom and Dad's house. Mom noticed my smile. You look cheerful, my dear. I didn't want to admit that my mood was at least partially okay, mostly due to the conversation with Henry and seeing him shirtless. Oh, just glad it was just a few loose wires and nothing serious. Is this what he told you? Yes, why? Honey, he spent the whole day replacing some parts in your engine. Your dad says it's a $1,400 repair. He only told you it was the wires because he didn't want you to pay him. I don't understand. He didn't say anything about any spare parts. Why didn't he let me pay him? Mom broke out into a huge smile and looked at me as if I were the stupidest person in the world. What do you think, honey? Suddenly, I smiled even wider. Gina, I got into a good rhythm of life with John. We got married shortly after my divorce from Henry was finalized, and I was happy. But the thing is, I wasn't happier, and that surprised me. As much as I loved John, I thought marrying him would be even more amazing than marrying Henry, but it wasn't. It wasn't worse, just different. We still had weekly barbecues with Scott, Andrea, Bill, and Lisa. Life basically continued the same, with the very notable exception of two things. Our children, at least Natalie, still talks to me sometimes, even if it's often accompanied by angry words and a raised voice. Savannah hasn't spoken to John since she found out, other than to tell him not to talk to her again. He periodically tries to contact her, but she still hasn't responded. I think none of us expected such consequences. I mean, Marcy had already moved on, so it wasn't like John left her for me, but Savannah is acting like he did. Since she doesn't talk to us, we don't know exactly what her problem is. But John and I did our best to focus on ourselves. The barbecues were the same, fun and stress-free. None of the other couples expressed any negative reaction to what we did. But the main thing is that we are happy together. Although I can't say I would have made the same choice if I knew then what I know now, I love him, and we are making the best of the situation. Henry, it was Sunday, and the ladies next door were having a bachelorette party, so the guys decided to do the same. We first went bowling, then had dinner, and then ended up at a club where a popular local band was performing. There was also a dance floor, but we weren't going to go there. The wives wouldn't be happy if one of the guys spread out the proverbial carpet with another woman, and I don't really like dancing, at least that's the way it's done these days. The evening went on, and the band was pretty good. I can't deny that we liked to look at some of the women on the dance floor, but that's where our misdeeds ended. Rick saw her first. Isn't that the ice queen in that booth over there? He pointed to a dark corner to the side of the stage. To my surprise, Taylor was sitting there alone. She looked so beautiful. I assumed that she had a date there and that he had gotten up to get them drinks, and I deflated a little, although I tried not to show it. That makes sense, since she only really comes out at night, Bart grumbled. Everyone except me laughed. I thought her religion was keeping her from having a good time. Ed said. Everyone else laughed again. I bet she drinks Bloody Marys, Rob added. There was more laughter, and I realized that I was starting to get angry, but I controlled myself. While I was watching, an attractive blonde came and sat in the other chair at Taylor's table, and I suddenly felt better. She wasn't on a date, she was with a friend. Where just a minute ago Taylor was looking at her phone, she was now animatedly talking to her friend. As I watched them, two guys came up to the table and asked them to dance. The blonde immediately stood up and took one of the guys by the hand, but Taylor shook her head very calmly and politely. I saw her say, "No, thank you." The guy was clearly disappointed, but he turned and left. I watched this happen 3 or 4 more times until people stopped asking Taylor to dance and started hitting on her friend. After about an hour and a half, I had already drunk several glasses. Okay, it was Diet Coke. I don't like alcohol. I spent the evening watching the band, or more often than not, Taylor. I really thought she was very beautiful. Once again, I watched as her friend joined a guy on the dance floor. As they walked away, Taylor was approached by a guy who looked quite aggressive and was probably a little drunk. He was clearly asking her to dance, and she again politely declined, but this guy got agitated and started arguing with her quite loudly. I wasted no time getting up and heading towards them. As I got closer, I began to hear what he was saying. "You've had your nose buried in this damn phone all evening. This is a dance club. You must dance." "Again, I appreciate your offer, but I'm here to spend time with a friend," Taylor said. He tried to pull her onto the dance floor. "Come on, honey, you'll have fun once you get out on the floor." "Really, I'm not interested. Please leave me alone." Finally, I joined the party. "Hey, buddy," the lady said she wasn't interested. "Why don't you leave? It's a free country, mate, and I'll stay here." "It's none of your business." I looked at Taylor, winked at her, and smiled. When our eyes met, I was lifted by a bright smile which she returned as she looked at me. "You're right. Enjoy your place." I turned to her. "Taylor, would you like to dance?" "My pleasure," she replied. "Thank you." She slid out the other side of the booth because it wasn't moving. I took her hand and led her to the dance floor. I looked at the guys, and the shocked expressions on their faces were priceless. Suddenly, the drunk guy became less interested in taking that particular seat. The song was mid-tempo, but we danced together as if it were a slow ballad. Although not too close, we looked into each other's eyes. "So it looks like you've gotten into the habit of saving me," Taylor said. "You are worthy of salvation," I replied. I swear I felt her flinch a little when I said that, in a good way, like I'd struck the right chord. "Thank you for such a nice compliment. It's strange that it's always you who saves me. I wonder why that is." I looked into her eyes again. "I think it's fate." I felt how we connected. I don't even remember ever experiencing this with Gina, even though it's been 20 years. There was something almost otherworldly about it, and I agreed. Our eyes never lost contact. We kissed. My soul caught fire. I could swear I was glowing from within. If the guys were shocked when I took Taylor to the dance floor, I can only imagine what their expressions were like at that moment. I saw her friend watching us with a look of complete shock on her face. I felt Taylor's head rest on my shoulder. We continued dancing for several songs, never changing what we were doing, no matter the tempo of the song, until I finally broke the silence. "Hey, were you driving the car or was your friend?" "She was driving. She came to pick me up at my apartment. And I want to take you home." Realizing that it sounded a little like I had something attractive on my mind, I stumbled to correct myself. "I mean, I want you to come home with me." "Better. So, can I be the person to take you home?" She smiled and giggled slightly while I tried to control myself and my abnormal tongue. "I would like that, and I'm ready to go if you're ready. Let me just tell Karen that I'm leaving." While she was doing this, I went to my table to tell the guys that I was leaving. They all looked rather embarrassed. "Henry," Ed said, "we regret the things we said. If we knew something was going on with you, we wouldn't have said anything." "It's okay, guys. No problems, really. But in the future, if I hear the words Ice Queen in reference to her again, we'll have some words. See you later, guys." Taylor, I have no idea what prompted the hands of fate to line up all my ducks in a row, excuse the ambiguous metaphor, but I was so excited about this turn of events. I wasn't even planning on meeting Karen tonight, and suddenly here we are. I was so excited I almost wanted to thank that drunk guy for bringing Henry to my rescue. "Looks like you met someone," Karen said as I approached her. "He's damn cute." "It's that guy, Karen, the one I told you about." "You mean the guy who lives next to your parents?" "Are you kidding? What are the chances of this happening?" "I don't know, but he wants to give me a ride home. Will you be okay here alone?" Of course. I have a few more friends here with whom I can team up. I look forward to hearing all about it. Okay, see you at work tomorrow. I quickly caught up with Henry, grabbing his hand as we got closer. Experiencing another small shock, I felt like a schoolgirl on a first date. I almost wanted to giggle and say that we would be fine. He opened the door of his pickup truck and helped me into it. I knew this was his work vehicle, so I was impressed by how clean it was and how nice the cabin smelled. I regretted that he didn't have a sofa, do they still make those, so I could sit next to him. He slowly pulled to the side and drove onto the road. I put my hands on my knees, not knowing what else to do with them, and he just reached out, took my left hand with his right, and held it while we drove, as if he had done this a million times and it was the most natural thing in the world. I liked it. One of the things that disappointed me about Jimmy was his submissive nature. Obviously, this left him open to Healy's influence, but sometimes it annoyed me. I liked that Henry was a man who took responsibility. As we drove, I felt the need to break the silence. Thanks again for dealing with that guy for me. He acted like a real idiot. Well, a beautiful woman like you makes men make fools of themselves. That's all. How the hell does he always manage to say exactly what he needs to say? I wondered if he could understand the effect he was having on me. Can I ask you a personal question? Taylor's voice brought my attention back from my feet to him, where it belonged. I wondered what deep, dark secret I was going to reveal because I knew I would tell him anything. Of course, Henry. Do you like ice cream? It was not what I expected, but I agreed. Actually, yes. He just smiled, and before I knew it, we were stopping in front of Baskin-Robbins. Out of habit, I started to open the door, but he just put his hand on mine. Wait, let me do this. Outwardly, I pretended to be calm, but inside, everything was screaming with joy. Had I really met a nice guy who knew how to treat a woman, and was he interested in me? I smiled as he opened my door and took my hand to help me out of the truck. We went inside and grabbed a cone, eating mostly in silence, but he never stopped looking into my eyes. Finally, he drove me back to my apartment and walked me to the door. Even though we started the evening apart, I began to think of it as our first date. And first dates always end awkwardly. But as with everything else, I was wrong again. I'm leaving in the morning for work out of town, which will keep me busy all week, so I won't be back until next weekend. Can I ask you out again when I get back? I looked into his deep brown eyes. I could get lost in them if I wasn't careful, and I really wasn't in the mood to be careful. Yes, Henry, I would like that. We'll talk when you get back and make a plan. Fine, although I don't like the idea of waiting that long. Thanks for a great time, Henry. I unlocked the door and entered. Henry, while I was driving the truck, kept drifting into another lane. Fortunately, there was little traffic. I had a hard time concentrating on driving because my thoughts kept going back to Taylor. I had a huge crush on her, and she seemed to feel the same. It was strange, of course, because before tonight, we had never gone on a date, and this was only half a date. I managed to return to the house unharmed, and when I entered, it seemed very empty, more empty than after a divorce. I had never been good at single life. I had only been on my own for a couple of years before meeting Gina, and it seemed like a very lonely existence. I had never been the guy who goes on dates and picks up random women in clubs. I did not go to college, but immediately after school, I began to work in my specialty, like my father. My father died in a construction accident about 10 years ago. Mom then moved back to Massachusetts to live with my grandparents, and we still talk on the phone regularly. It was an early morning, so I packed the last of my things for the week and then climbed into bed. The truth was that I still missed Gina, or at least her presence, lying in bed with someone, waking up, and having someone to talk to, sitting down to breakfast together, that sort of thing. One day, I saw a phrase that I think applies to me, born married. The main point is that I don't feel complete without a permanent woman in my life. Until recently, whenever I felt acutely lonely, Gina's face would appear in my head. It seemed natural because we had been together for so long. But today, as I crawled into bed, I thought about Taylor and wished she were next to me. Taylor, it's been a very long week. I had such a wonderful time and made a real connection with Henry last Sunday night, and then he had to leave town. We talked on the phone a couple of times this week while he was gone, but it wasn't the same as meeting up and going out. He worked a lot and was tired, so we didn't talk for long. When I met Jimmy in Florida, I wasn't in much of a relationship. I had a few high school romances, but nothing serious, certainly no one I thought could be the one. So when I met Jimmy and started getting serious about him, I just knew it was love because I had never felt the way I felt about him. Last night, I arrived at my parents' house knowing that Henry would return from work either late in the evening or early in the morning. It was already mid-morning when Mom was making bacon, eggs, and toast. "Honey," Mom asked, "could you go get the newspaper?" "Of course, Mom." I was walking slowly down the path when I noticed a car I hadn't seen before turn the corner onto our street. It was a newer model sedan, but they all looked the same to me. Henry could probably tell me exactly what it was, I thought, and his name popped into my head, making me look towards his house. I then saw this strange car pull up to his driveway. Now this really caught my attention. The car door opened, and a very beautiful young woman, probably around 20 or so, stepped out. I was not happy about this turn of events, and when I saw her take out her small suitcase from the trunk, I became even more angry. This meant she was staying for the weekend. Then I saw Henry himself walking from the direction of his house. I hid behind one of the bushes in Mom's yard so he wouldn't see me watching them. He then picked up her suitcase, took her hand, and they went to his house. I knew it, men are all the same. "Miss Ruth, I was wondering why Taylor was taking so long to bring the newspaper." I was just about to go outside to make sure nothing had happened when she burst through the front door, making a loud noise throughout the house. I thought my decorative plates would fall to the floor, but they held up. "This son is a freak," she screamed at the top of her lungs. "Oh no, what now?" I realized she was on the verge of tears, but they were mixed with intense anger that I hadn't seen since she got divorced. Since then, she had felt bitterness and anger, but never with such intensity. It had to be because of Henry. "What's the matter, dear? What happened?" I knew it was too good to be true. I just knew it. "Taylor, honey, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a little teenage bimbo who just showed up at Henry's house to spend the weekend doing God knows what. I just saw her pull right into his driveway in her little blue car like she owned the place. She kissed and hugged him, and then they went inside. He's probably with her right now." As soon as she mentioned the little blue car, I knew what a mistake she had made. But I decided to let her suffer a little for jumping to conclusions. Was she a brunette with hair just above her shoulders? Taylor turned her head and looked at me. If her eyes were lasers, I would already have a hole in my body. "Yes, that's exactly it." "Do you know her?" "Oh yes, this is Natalie. We've met her a couple of times. She's very sweet." "And it didn't occur to you to mention to me that Henry had some girl half his age?" "Well, until last weekend, I didn't even realize there was any reason to mention it. And last week, it didn't even occur to me. She hasn't appeared for several weeks. What the hell could he see in a girl half his age?" "Well, I think this is a stupid question. He sees a hot, tight little body that a 36-year-old woman like me can't compete with. But I can imagine him paying for it, the idiot. Well, he pays quite a lot. He bought her this car and is paying for her college education. But she loves him very much. I doubt it. Perhaps she only loves his bank account. I don't know why he doesn't see this. Oh, he knows how important money is to her, and he pays willingly and happily. I'll bet she does what she does for him in exchange for that. But that doesn't matter anymore. He's not my problem anymore." I looked at Taylor and saw that she was suddenly on the verge of tears. It was time to end my little game. "Well, Taylor, you really can't blame him. After all, that's what good fathers do." I watched her carefully as the reality of the situation unfolded. The relief on her face, and indeed throughout her body, was obvious. She felt such obvious relief that tears welled up in her eyes. "So this is his daughter?" "Yes, honey. And I'm sure you like each other very much. She looks so much like him. Come on, honey, let's go sit and eat. You know, you could have said this earlier and saved me from this very interesting conversation." I don't think so. I took her hand and sat her down at the table. I placed a plate and a small glass of orange juice in front of her. I would like to know why he got divorced, Taylor said. I'm so afraid it's something he did. Well, why don't you ask him? Call and invite him to dinner tonight, and you two can talk. Do you think he'll tell me? Why not? He clearly has feelings for you. Heck, he even told me. But after all, I am a wise old woman. She stopped eating and looked at me. Did he tell you about his divorce? Tell me, Mother. I'm sorry, dear, but this is not my story to share. This is the conversation you need to have with him. Call him. Henry, I completely forgot that Nat comes over for the weekend, but I'm always happy to see her. I warned her that I might be going somewhere this weekend. Is this with a girl? She asked, smiling and winking. If I go, then yes, it will be with a girl. Well, with a woman. Well done, Daddy. It's high time you got out there. A few minutes later, the phone rang. Hello, Henry, this is Taylor. Hello. I was just about to call you to find out when I could see you. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Mom wanted to know if you don't have any other plans. Would you like to come to dinner with your daughter tonight? Let me check with the boss. Natalie? Hey, Nat, do you want to go to Miss Ruth's for dinner tonight? Yes, damn it, I won't refuse dinner from the best chef I know. Looks like we'll be there. Although I was hoping I wouldn't have to wait until dinner to see you. This will give you the opportunity to spend some time with Natalie. Besides, I have some things to do before I meet you. Okay. I was a stupid romantic, but I wanted a new outfit, one that no one had ever seen me in. I didn't want to look slutty or anything, just something new, even if I was the only person who knew it was new. I went to the mall and finally found what I was looking for in a small boutique next to Macy's. It accentuated my round but slightly hid the fact that I don't have very large breasts. After that, I went to a salon in a shopping center where I had my hair cut, washed, and styled. Finally, I went to Ulta and bought some new makeup. On the one hand, I knew that I didn't need to do all this, but on the other hand, I really wanted to. I went back to Mom and Dad's house, helped Mom out a little, and then finally hopped in the shower and started getting ready. Henry, I invited Natalie to dinner, and then we went to the cinema. I was just killing time. I told Natalie about the last 2 weeks with Taylor, starting with the car. So, you spent the whole day fixing her car and even paid for the part, but you didn't tell her anything? How will she know you did it? It doesn't matter if she knows anything, Nat. She knows I fixed it, but I did it for myself because I wanted to do it for her. I know it seems strange considering your generation is all about letting the whole world know what you have for breakfast on social media, but some people do things because it makes them feel good and don't want to make a big deal out of it. For example, people who donate to charity and then issue a press release. This makes us wonder if they did it to help people or to help themselves. Okay, I understand your point of view, but I would still like her to know what a good thing you did for her. On the way home, I bought a bottle of wine and flowers, and then we went home to get ready. You've never dressed up for dinner at Grandma Ruth's before, Natalie teased me. She knew exactly why I was a little dressed up, and I just stuck my tongue out. We left my house at 5:56 p.m. and headed to Ruth and Richard's house. I was about to ring the bell when the door swung open, and Taylor was waiting for us. We entered the house, and Miss Ruth walked towards us. I kissed her on the cheek, handed her the wine, and introduced my daughter and the new woman in my life. Natalie, Miss Ruth, I called. Please help me in the kitchen. Of course. Grandma Ruth and I stood still until they rounded the corner. Then we looked at each other. I handed her the flowers. Today, you look even more beautiful. Your hair looks beautiful. I missed you while I was away. I missed you too. And thanks for noticing. You look good too. Let's go out on the deck. I'd like to talk a little. I nodded, and she took my hand and led me to the terrace. As we stepped onto the deck, I looked back into the kitchen. Both Natalie and Miss Ruth were smiling widely. They seemed to approve. We sat in a couple of lounge chairs that were close enough to hold hands. How was your work this week? Good. In the end, we had some problems with permits and personnel, but we solved them quite quickly. It was a rush job, so we were paid overtime, but a 12-hour day is a 12-hour day, no matter how much you get paid. It sounds tiring, but I'm glad you're back. She paused for a minute, as if gathering her thoughts and perhaps the courage to say something specific. Henry, can I ask you a private question? Taylor, you can ask me anything anytime, and I will always answer you as honestly as I can. I'm sorry to have to ask this, but I have to know, why did you get divorced? Wow, you immediately went to personal topics. I made myself more comfortable in the chair. I'll make a deal, I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours. Agreed. Well, in general, my wife left me for another man. You know why? I suspected that she was trying to find out if I had done something to push Gina into the arms of another man. Basically, did I cheat on her, hit her, or do anything that led to Gina leaving me? I told her the whole story, from John and Gina's college affair to the eventual divorce, and then my decision to move away and start over. Do you know how they are doing? Does she regret her decision? As far as I know, everything is fine with them. Anyway, I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but I prefer not to hear about them. N respects that. I can't believe she just left a perfectly good marriage like that. I mean, you may have had some problems, but at least from your point of view, everything was fine. If she was unhappy with something, she didn't share it with me. Well, it was a pretty disgusting thing to do. But on the other hand, if she hadn't done it, you wouldn't be sitting here with me right now. You know, I had the same thought. Okay, it's your turn. I listened in shock as she talked about the end of her marriage to Jimmy. It's no surprise she had issues with anger and trust when it came to men and relationships. He had completely betrayed her. 3 years had passed, and she was still suffering from it. I gently squeezed her hand and, looking into her eyes, said quietly, I'm sorry for what he did, Taylor. We're not all like that. She looked at me with what I hoped was affection in her eyes. I could see that she was fighting back tears, even now. I know that now, Henry. You showed it to me. Thank you. Our thoughts were interrupted by Natalie's voice coming from behind us. Miss Taylor, Dad, dinner is ready. We got up and went into the house. Natalie, I was so happy watching my dad find someone. He mentioned Miss Taylor in passing a couple of times, but I had no idea they had any kind of relationship, let alone that it developed the way it actually turned out. While they were walking on the deck, I mentioned this to Grandma Ruth, and she told me in more detail what happened last weekend at the club. While I helped prepare dinner, I watched them on the deck. My dad loved my mom unconditionally, and when she left, the light went out in his eyes. But as I watched him hold Miss Taylor's hand as they talked on the deck, that light returned and perhaps even grew a little brighter. I had never met Miss Taylor before, but I saw pictures of her on the wall when we visited Grandma Ruth, and Dad told me a little about her. This afternoon, she was beautiful in photographs, but even more beautiful in person. Since I didn't really know her, I couldn't understand the expression on her face when she talked to Dad, but I could definitely tell that she had feelings for him. When they talked, she held his hand as if her life depended on it. I almost felt guilty when I went out to tell them that dinner was ready. Taylor, I said. I held Henry's hand tightly as we stood up and headed into the house for dinner. I didn't want to let him go, and with the obvious purpose of cheering us up, we were seated right next to each other. Showing his gentlemanly side again, Henry pulled out my chair and pushed it in as I sat down before sitting down himself. I don't think Jimmy has ever done anything like this, I thought. I compared everything Henry and Jimmy did, and every time, Henry came out on top. Since Jimmy was my only serious partner, everyone had to be compared to him. I wanted to continue holding Henry's hand, but that would require me to eat with my left hand, and that just wouldn't work. So, Natalie, my mother told me that you are studying at the university. What do you study? I'm studying healthcare management. I find medicine interesting, but I'm not interested in all that training, so I decided to go into the administrative side of things. I love it. Dad said that you are a teacher and volleyball coach. There was a quick exchange of glances between them. Henry seemed to say, you shouldn't have told her that, and she seemed to say, it's a pity. Yes, I work at a local high school, and I really like what I do. Most of the dinner conversation was me learning about Natalie or her telling me about her dad, and it was all good. I realized that she was doing everything she could to show him in the best light possible, and I felt good because it meant that she thought I was good enough for her father. When I was growing up, we always helped clean up after dinner. We were expected to clear our plates and then help with the cleanup, whether it was washing dishes, clearing tables, or wiping down kitchen counters. Even Dad did his part, so that was my expectation today. "Henry, after we clean up, would you like to go for a walk?" He looked at me and smiled as if he was completely delighted with my proposal. I wish I could, but Mom had other plans. "Everything is fine. The three of us can handle it. You two go for a walk. It won't hurt you to be alone." It was obvious that Taylor was as attracted to me as I was to her, and Natalie and Miss Ruth approved. At Miss Ruth's insistence, we skipped cleaning and walked out the front door for a walk, holding hands the entire way. We walked around the area for about 30 minutes, just talking and getting to know each other. Finally, we returned to my street. Just before the entrance, she suggested an alternative route. "You know, I've never been to your house. Do you want to take a look?" She nodded, and we continued past her parents' house and onto my house. She looked around while I waited for an answer. "I'm impressed," she finally said. "Since you're a bachelor, I expected to see a keg in the corner and posters of women in bikinis on the walls." Without missing a beat, I replied, "Oh, it's in the bedroom." I caught a look that could have knocked me off my feet, and I burst out laughing. "I'm just kidding, honey. Just kidding." "You better be," she began to say, but then her expression changed. "Do you realize you just called me sweetheart?" "I'm sorry, maybe I went too far, but that's how I imagined you." She gave me the sweetest look and then said, "It's true. I just didn't know if you knew about it or not." I didn't need to be told twice. Taylor, he hugged me, and everything was just perfect. As we were resting, I felt him pull me closer and kiss me. The calm was broken when he spoke. "Baby, how much time do you have left on your lease?" This question seemed random to me, but I answered, "I still have about 2 months. And what if I hope it doesn't scare you, but I don't want to spend another night without you? I think you should move in with me. I'll help you pay the rest of the rent." Thinking about this, a huge smile appeared on my lips. I rolled over so that I was face to face with him. I looked deeply into his brown eyes. "I think I should too," I replied. "How about you stay here for the night, and tomorrow we'll start moving your things? I can ask the guys to help, so it won't take much time." "That sounds great, but we've been gone for quite some time. We should probably go back to my parents' house." "I agree. We probably need to take a shower first." We climbed into a shower together, got dressed, and went back to Mom and Dad's house. We found the three of them sitting on the deck, talking. We walked out and joined them as if we had only been gone for a few minutes. "Sorry we were gone for so long, Mom. We lost track of time. It must have been quite a walk. You even stopped to take a shower before heading home." It's not that we were ashamed of it, far from it, but we were completely spent. Henry, Taylor, and I got married quickly, as soon as we got permission. It was a small civil wedding. We had both considered a big wedding, but neither of us wanted it. Perhaps it was superstition or just the realization that we didn't want to go through it all again, or maybe a combination of both, but we stood before the judge at City Hall and exchanged our vows, committing ourselves to each other and only each other. Gina and I didn't go on a honeymoon right after we got married because we couldn't afford it, but we ended up going to Hawaii for a week about 2 years later. Not wanting to mix up memories, Taylor and I took a cruise to Jamaica for our honeymoon. We took a ton of photos throughout the day. Judging by the looks from our neighbors, some disapproving but mostly positive, our activity was not as private as we would have liked. Taylor wanted children in the worst possible way. I could have done without them since I already had Natalie, but I loved being a dad and was happy to do it again for her. We hadn't specifically started pursuing this yet. Taylor used this fact to her advantage and gave me a good time. I was sitting at home, taking a couple of days off after finishing another successful project. At this point, we had been married for about 6 months. Taylor was away somewhere, but she didn't tell me where. I heard her car pull into the garage, and as always, I was glad that she was home. But everything changed when she burst through the door connecting the garage to the living room. "You son of a," she yelled at me. This was not what I expected, and I immediately went on the defensive. "What's the matter, baby? I can't believe you did this to me." I was stunned at what this could be about. Taylor hadn't had any trust issues lately, but I figured she saw something that she might have misinterpreted. I stood up and started to walk away from her, a little afraid that she might attack me. "Baby, what are you talking about? It's like you don't know what I'm talking about. You did this to me, and you did it on purpose. Don't try to pretend." "Honey, I'm not pretending. I just don't understand what you're talking about." "Oh, you're trying to pretend to be ignorant. I don't know what I did, honey, so I won't admit anything. Try to be honest, Henry, and I think you'll understand." I was starting to get very upset. I couldn't imagine what I might have done or even what she might think I had done. Tired of the chase, I finally stopped and let her catch me. "Baby, please tell me what's going on." She hit me very gently on the chest and then looked me in the eyes with an expression like I had just stepped on her puppy. She completely hooked me. "You made me a baby, you idiot." Her face broke into the most beautiful, amazing smile I'd ever seen, but it still took me a minute for the words to sink in because I was expecting some kind of accusation. "What? Are you pregnant?" 2 months, baby. I just came from the doctor." I picked her up and spun her around, excited about the good news. In fact, when we talked about it and it was just a theory or a plan, I didn't mind. But now that it was a reality, I was ecstatic and couldn't wait to have a child with the woman I loved. Taylor, having never been pregnant, didn't know what it was like, but I knew I didn't feel right, weak and dizzy sometimes, a little nauseous, just generally out of sorts. My first thought was a brain tumor. A bit extreme, I know, but in my mind, I thought that maybe fate was waiting for me to finally be happy before taking that happiness away again. After Jimmy, I sometimes wondered if God had something against me. When Dr. Markley walked into the office with a smile on her face, I thought it was good news, maybe the flu, but at least something mild. When she placed the bottle of prenatal vitamins on the table and I heard the word pregnant, I was overcome with joy that I cannot express. Having a child with the man I loved was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. After I told Henry, we immediately went to Mom and Dad to share the good news. I was an only child, and they were already starting to worry that they wouldn't be able to spoil their grandchildren. We decided to have a little fun with them and give back a little, especially after Mom had let me think that Natalie was Henry's girlfriend. "Mom, Dad, Henry, and I want to tell you something. Please have a seat." "This sounds serious," Mom said. "Is everything all right?" I pretended to be overcome with emotion and let Henry take over. He did a great job of filling his voice with emotion as he spoke. "Taylor, I just got back from the doctor. It looks like she's contracted, well, I guess you'd call it a parasite." Miss Ruth became a little anxious. "Oh, Taylor, honey, how did it happen?" "This is serious. This is very serious. Mom, I'll probably be sick for a while, and they expect me to put on a lot of weight. This is one of the side effects, darling. Everything will be fine. Can this be cured? Can they give you anything that will help?" "Not really. I just have to let it run its course. Doctors don't know everything. We can do some research and see what options we have." "Did he give you the name of the disease?" "I think the medical term is pregnancy." Mom started writing it down before she realized what I said, then suddenly burst into tears of happiness and hugged us both. Dad, all this time, sat stoically. Mom usually speaks for both of them, but I saw how his eyes watered when he realized that he would soon become a grandfather. Henry, Taylor, and I recently celebrated our wedding anniversary. She waddled around the house, ready to explore, even while 8 months pregnant. She was even more beautiful, and even with her bloated belly, our amazing intimate life didn't suffer. Life was good. We had just finished dinner and were about to sit down to watch a movie on Netflix when my phone rang. It was Natalie. "Hello, Nat. How are you, dear?" I asked. "Daddy, can you come to the North City Medical Center right now?" The tension was noticeable in her voice, and I instantly became wary. What happened, baby? Are you okay? At this moment, I felt Taylor tense up too. I'm fine, Dad. This is about Mom. She had an accident. Everything is very bad. I relaxed a little and was slightly annoyed. Why is she calling me? Look, honey, I'm glad you've improved your relationship with your mom a little over the past few months, but that doesn't make her my problem now. John is responsible for her. She paused, then almost in a whisper, said, Dad, John is dead. He also had an accident. I said the first thing that came to my mind, and then I was very ashamed of it. Is it true? Fine, but that still doesn't make your mother my problem. Wait, honey, I interrupted my conversation with Nat to quickly tell Taylor what was going on. She just nodded her head and went into the bedroom. Sorry, continue. I know it's not your problem, Dad. This is mine, and I need your help. They're asking me all kinds of questions and asking me to fill out a bunch of forms, and I don't know what to do. Savannah needs help too. She's trying to cope with her father's death, and she's having no more luck than I am. Okay, sweetie, hold on tight, and I'll be there as soon as I can. But don't expect me to talk to her or even visit her, okay? Daddy, I turned off my phone just as Taylor came out of the bedroom wearing her coat. Wait, Beauty, where are you going? Are we going to the hospital to help Natalie? I'm going. You will stay here. I won't take you, pregnant, into this petri dish with bacteria and infections. But, baby, I want to be close to you. I know, honey, but I don't want you to catch anything. It'll be boring, and you'll feel uncomfortable, but I promise to keep in touch with you, okay? She pouted but relented. Okay, but you'd better keep me informed as if I were standing next to you. I got to the hospital and went up to Gina's floor. I stopped at the nurse's desk and was directed to the waiting area, where I found Natalie. She hugged me tightly and brought me up to date. It looks like Mom will survive, but she will need physical therapy. She broke her left leg and arm, but otherwise, her injuries were mostly superficial. Do you know what happened? An officer is with her now. He said he would fill me in on the matter after he talked to my mother. A few minutes later, the policeman left Gina's room. Miss Weston, thank you for your patience. It sounds like your mom is very lucky. She will not face any charges, as she was just a passenger. Excuse me, what are the charges, and who are you? I asked. This is my daughter, and I'm helping her with paperwork for my ex-wife. Well, preliminary toxicology reports indicate that Mr. and Mrs. Hartman were both under the influence, although actual levels have not yet been determined. Since Mrs. Hartman was a passenger, she will not face any charges. And since Mr. Hartman is deceased, obviously nothing can be done about him. However, there could be a civil issue with the other owner of the car, so she should be prepared. I'd like to clarify, officer, just so we're clear on what you're talking about. John and Gina were both apparently drunk or on something, and they got into an accident for which they were at fault. Is that correct? Yes, sir. What about the people from the other car? There have been no deaths, fortunately, but there have been a few concussions and broken bones, and of course, their car is totaled. It will depend on how good their insurance is. Okay, officer, thank you very much. I'll go check on my mom. I sat down to wait and see what would happen next. As Natalie walked into her mom's hospital room, I sent Taylor a quick message and then pondered the turn of events. Part of me thought that this would never have happened if Gina had still been with me, since I didn't drink alcohol. But partly, I felt sorry for her. No matter how she behaved towards me, in the end, her husband was dead, and now she faced her golden years without the man she loved. I wondered if she would try to find someone else or settle into a single life with friends and as a mom, waiting to be a grandma. She would have to work, which she only did for a short time right after college and before she and I got married. She'd probably have to sell the house, and she'd probably want to. I can't imagine this house being anything more than a reminder of the two men she no longer has. My thoughts were interrupted by Natalie's appearance from her mother's room. She wants to see you, Daddy, Natalie said. I told her I would ask, but to expect the answer to be no. It was strange. I had carried this anger towards Gina for so long, and suddenly, at that moment, it disappeared. I mean, why the hell was I still angry? I still had my wonderful daughter, a great job that paid well and that I loved, a wonderful wife, and a new daughter who would be born soon. What Gina did was in the past, and it could be argued that she was paying for it now. Of course, it was painful to go through this, but in the end, everything turned out for the better. At that moment, I left it all behind me and out of my mind. I'll go talk to her. The surprise at my answer was noticeable on Natalie's face, but it soon broke into a smile, and I think she also realized that I had turned the corner. I walked into Gina's room, and she responded with a weak smile, probably due to her lack of strength and the medications they were giving her. "Henry, you've come." "Thank you." "How are you feeling, Gina?" "Physically, I think I'll be fine. I'm emotionally broken, although you can't tell from me because of all this medication. You know John is gone, don't you?" "I heard." "Yes, I'm sorry about that." "Is it true?" "Okay, at first I wasn't sorry, but in the last few minutes, I realized that I didn't care about the person all this bitterness was turning me into, so I let it go. So, yes, I'm sorry you lost John, and I know you'll need help to get through this. But I want you to know that Taylor and I will be here to help." "That would be great. I hope to one day meet your beautiful wife. Natalie told me that she will soon have a new little sister. You must be excited." "Yes, very. Henry, when it comes down to it, I'm sorry for what I did to you. I had built up a marriage with John in my mind, believing that he would be amazing, but it was an ordinary marriage. I loved him, and he loved me, but I already had this with you, and I regret what I did. I think deep down I knew that you would never share me, and that gave me a reason to be with John. But at the same time, it was your fault. I was stupid, and I owe you an apology. Consider that everything is forgotten and you are forgiven. Gina, this is already in the past. Friends? Definitely. I think this is just the first of big changes for me. With John gone, I'll have to sell the house and find a job. I do not know how. I don't have any skills. Just focus on getting better. When the time comes, just call me. I'll help you get a job somewhere." "That would be great." "Henry, thank you." I said goodbye, wanting to get back to Taylor as soon as possible. All the paperwork with Gina was done, so all that was left was to get her well. I walked out of the room and saw that Savannah had joined Natalie. I walked over and hugged her. "How are you holding up, Savvy?" "I'm fine, Uncle Henry. I could use some help with the paperwork, but other than that, I'm fine." "I'll help you. Let's go." Paperwork in the morgue was different from working with living patients. I'd never handled paperwork for a deceased person before, but we got through it by talking as we went along. "I know you haven't spoken to your father for a long time. I hope it wasn't because of me." "No, it was because of my mother. I think she wished Dad would find someone else, but her family and friends, you guys were all so important to her. She wouldn't have been upset that your father did this, separating you from your Aunt Gina. He disrespected her and her memory, and I cannot forgive that. He couldn't have done it if Gina hadn't agreed, but now it's all over. If you need anything, Savvy, call me." "Well, since you started talking about it, I turned out to be an orphan and therefore need new parents. May I interest you in Aunt Taylor?" I asked. "Darling, it would be an honor for us. In fact, you're coming home with me and Nat tonight." "I think we should all be together," I replied. And that's exactly what we did. When we finally finished at the hospital, we all met at the house. Just for fun, as I walked Savannah through the front door, I announced to my very pregnant wife, "It's a girl." "Henry, I just turned 50 years old, and I'm amazed at the changes that have happened in my life over the past 9 years. Since that morning when Gina asked me to play and share, Savannah and Natalie got married. I married them both off. Natalie married her longtime boyfriend, Michael. They live in an apartment nearby, and Natalie has just announced that she is 3 months pregnant. Savannah met a guy on her first day at her new job, and it was love at first sight. They got married after only knowing each other for 2 months, but they have 2 children and love each other very much. The kids call Taylor and me Grandma and Grandpa. I got Gina a job as a personal assistant for one of our competitors. I interviewed her and gave her a good recommendation. He told me that hiring her was one of the best decisions of his life. They finally got married last year after Gina had resisted the idea of a third trip to the altar for some time. Taylor and I are very happily married, and we have made our dream of having a big family come true. Not only do we have Nat, Savvy, and their husbands and grandchildren, but Taylor spent virtually the entire first 5 years of our marriage pregnant. Samantha is 8, Jasmine is 7, Nathan is 5, and baby Carmen just turned 4. Taylor is a wonderful mother, and I love her more and more every day. But we were too fertile together, so after Carmen was born, we had the procedure done. Miss Ruth is still with us, but 6 years ago we lost Richard. He lived to see the birth of his first 2 grandchildren, and for that, we are all very grateful. Miss Ruth still lives in her home, and we visit her every day to make sure she is being cared for. Soon we will sell both houses and move to a larger one together, as the children are growing every day and we will need more space. What do you think of this story? Which part was better? I like the second part better, because the main character found his happiness and found a good woman and a mother for his child. Write in the comments your stories and share your impressions. Until new videos.